When I asked my friends who are familiar with Django why they did not use Django in their last project, the conversation goes something like this. So, why didn't you use Django for that? Oh, it was a simple task, so Django would have been too heavy for that? Okay. Well, that would have been a lot of boilerplate, no? Right. That seemed more suitable for I think. Don't you think? I wanted to tell that I use Django all the time, be it for small projects or for big projects. Well, I should qualify that by saying that I actually use the right tool for the right job. It's not like I blindly pick Django. But I feel that most of the time people eliminate Django quite early in their selection process because they have some preconceived notions about Django. Like, if it's a very small project, you should not use it. Or if I just want to use a single file, I should not use it. So that's the sort of misconception that I want to eliminate here by trying to help you make a very simple project in which uses a lot of features and capabilities of Django, but it's useful as well. I'm going to create not a very simple proof of concept hello world type of program. I'm going to actually make a pre-release landing page. So what is a pre-release landing page? An example of that is something like a product that you have not completed or released yet, but you want to put up a website, you want to put up a coming soon page which says that this is the product that we are working on, these are the features that it will have. If you are interested for a private beta, or if you just want to be informed when this product is out in the market, then you should just share your email. So we'll collect that email, we'll say thank you so much for giving that email, and whenever the product becomes available, we inform them. So this is the customer user experience or the visitor experience from our side of view, from the person who is actually building the product. This is extremely useful, right? If you have learned the concept of minimum viable product, you actually know that you should understand in very quick iterations what the interest level for a product or for something that you're building is. And this is actually one of the best ways, recommended in so many books, so many articles. You should try to put up a coming soon page which will gauge the interest, or how many people are interested, or what kind of people are interested in your product, which will actually help you give more confidence, which might even help you get more funding and investment in your project or in your product. Now, we are also trying to do something a bit more. We are not just going to collect the email address, we are also going to collect the referrals, or which website actually led them to our landing page or coming soon page. This could be a website like Hacker News or Reddit, which aggregates such links. It could be a social network where you have shared links to your website, like Facebook or Twitter. It could also be an influencer's page, which you might have specifically asked them or requested the influencers to cover your product. So all these are sources which help you identify, which can help you in your marketing efforts, right? For example, if you use Google Analytics in your page, will not be using, but in case you're using, these referrals can be filtered. You can identify which are the sources. You just go to traffic sources, you look at the referrals link of that particular Google Analytics product. You can actually see who are or which are the websites which are referring to you, and which is the most effective, which will help you understand where you should be focused, which kind of channel marketing channel you should be focusing on, which sort of people are coming to you, etc. Another interesting information that's freely available to most of us, which we may use or we may not use, is the visitor's IP information. This could also come indirectly through Google Analytics, but here we are going to capture it and store it. The visitor's IP information can be used for many things. It's not completely reliable. For instance, if somebody is using a corporate network and they are going to access your website, the IP might show that of your corporate network. But however, if it's an individual who is accessing from their homes, as many of us are at this point in time working from home, it would tell you which country that person is, that IP is. In fact, it might even position in the map where exactly this IP is located. So all this information is quite useful, and I want to say that this is a tutorial, or this is a video which tries to explain several concepts, and many kinds of people might find this useful. For instance, you want to use Django for a small task. As the example we are showing here, I want to create a coming soon page, which might feel like, just a couple of pages or just one page, and you might think that Django might not be the most lightweight solution, or it might be a little too much to use for this. But as we will quickly see, it is in most cases the right tool for the job, and it has a number of advantages that other micro frameworks like Bottle or even Flask might not provide. Another interesting thing is many people might find Django to be overwhelming, especially if you're new to Django. And if everything is in a single file, you can just scroll up and down and see all the parts and how they connect to each other, which might be still possible if you have directories and files, but you have to jump around or hop around, and which might make the whole process a little more cumbersome. Whereas here it would be all in one file, making it much more easier to understand. Another thing is, I want to learn the techniques of a landing page. I want to understand what web developers generally do, and these techniques can be applied for any other framework. I mean, even if you don't use a framework, like even if you use plain PHP, techniques that I'm going to talk to you about might be useful, might be something that you are not aware of, and can come helpful. So hi, my name is Arun Ravindran. Welcome to arunrocks.com, and I will be telling you how you can build a Django application just in one file. So what is the first step? The first step is quite familiar to people who use Django. You have to set up a separate environment, and typically how this is done is by creating a new directory. You start with an empty directory. So I'm going to create a directory called Django coming soon, because it is a coming soon page. Then I'm going to enter this directory. I'm going to run Python venv module to create a virtual environment, and I'm going to name this environment as env. Python would immediately, or most of the time, it would take a few seconds to complete this creation of the environment. Next, I would like to install Django into this environment. But before that, let me activate. So I'm using Ubuntu Linux. So there you go. I'm activating the environment by calling this shell script. I'm using the bash shell as well. And you can see that it's now activated because env appears on the left. Now I can go ahead and install Django. So make sure that you have always activated the environment. I already have Django cached, so it's saying that it's already satisfied. Next, I try to upgrade my pip, because sometimes this message appears that you're using an older version of pip. So now pip is getting upgraded from version 20.2.4 to 20.3. This again is optional. You may not want to do this, but I always try to keep the environment up to date so that it's having all the recent updates. All right, so now you have successfully installed it. Looks like it's complete now. For a couple of people are interested in knowing what I did there, what sort of setup I had. What you were seeing was actually my editor, not the terminal, but the editor has an embedded terminal-like emulator. And my editor of choice, as people who are familiar with my channel know, is Emacs. Don't worry if you're not using Emacs, you can use any Python editor. You can even use a simple text editor, doesn't matter, you can still understand what's going on here. The font I'm using, the color theme I'm using, the window manager, I'm using a Linux operating system and Firefox browser. They're all mentioned here in case you're interested. A quick note for people who are not very familiar with Emacs. This is how the interface would look like, and this is what the interface with labels look like. So the line numbers, the cursors, the scroll bar, all that should be familiar. I expect most people not to be very familiar with the status bar or the bar at the bottom part. So that's why I've mentioned that. You might see the Git branch mentioned, the file name mentioned. The file name is quite important so that you know what you're looking at. But in this case, it's just a single file, so it's not a big confusion. The mini buffer is the last line in white. You might see me opening files over there because Emacs does not pop up open window, open file window or anything like that, or a save file window or a switch to another window. It all happens by messages which are shown in the mini buffer. And I find that to be much more faster than using a file browser. And then you would see the virtual environment and the Python major mode and the line numbers and the column numbers. So all of that should be quite familiar. Like I said, I want to emphasize again, you don't have to be using Emacs. It's just for you to follow along that I'm explaining all this. Next is step 1. We are finally going to start doing the actual process of making the Hello World app. So I'm going to start by creating an empty app.py. So I'm going to say touch app.py. In Unix, that's a command to create a 0 length file. It's not really required in Emacs, but I'm going to do that anyway for people who are using other editors. I'm going to import system and then import the settings. As you can see, there is a bit of auto completion happening in Emacs, which depending upon how comfortable you are could be very helpful or not so helpful. If I'm working or typing really fast, sometimes it is annoying because I have to actually read what is shown inside these options or auto completion drop down boxes so that I can pick and choose. Right now I'm just going to do a couple of standard imports. First, I've imported settings because as you must have imagined, if there is no separate file other than one file, where would the settings.py go? So the answer is, as you might have guessed, settings is embedded in the same file. That's why I'm importing settings, and urls.py is also within the same file. In fact, the entire HTML is also in the same file. Now you can see that I'm configuring my settings. So this is typically what goes inside settings.py, but the same thing is now put in as arguments to settings.configure. I've set debug equal to true because I want to see the error messages. I have to set a secret key to something which is a random string. Normally start project does that for you, but here I'm not using start project at all, as you would have noticed. And I'm just creating a simple string, and I'm just making a comment saying that it is something that you should change and it's insecure. But for our step 1, I'm just going to do that. The root configuration is a very important setting for Django to identify where urls.py is. And I'm going to set it to the name of this file, app.py. Now, why is that? Because app.py will soon have the urls.py paths embedded in it. Now I'm going to write the first view, home. This is the home page. It's just going to return an HTTP response. It's going to be a plain string. So it will just say welcome. Send another way of hello world, I guess. And now I'm going to write the URL patterns. So URL patterns is what is inside urls.py, and this would be now inside our app.py, which is the only file we are going to use, as we just mentioned. I'm going to set the path, the home path, to the home view. So the empty string is actually signifying that It's whatever you typed in as the website's domain name. It would take you to the root. The root is typically shown as an empty string. As the convention in Python is that if name equal to main is the segment where we write the part of the file which gets executed when Python runs this file as a script instead of importing it. If you import it, if name equal to main does not get executed. So if you just run the app.py file, this part should get executed. That is imitating what is inside manage.py. So this is how the file should look in the end. It's a very simple file. You can actually see it in a single screen. All the minimum required, the bare minimum, it's the most minimal I could go for creating a Django application. All it does is show when you open the page, it shows a welcome, and if you run this file just by saying python app.py, it should go to that main part, the last two lines, and it should execute that, which is exactly what happens in manage.py. So we don't require manage.py also. It's an important thing which most Django developers use for running servers or running a shell or even migrating and things like that. Now let's look at the README file. I prefer to do this quite early on so that in case I have to upload it to the GitHub repository, I have something to show because GitHub automatically shows the README page. And the second important thing is I want to mention how to run this. So I'll at the minimum have this heading running, and it'll show how you can run this project. In this case, all you have to do is call app.py using Python. And since this is going to work exactly like manage.py, you can use most of the same arguments like run server. And what the number after run server is, as in manage.py, the port in which it would be running. If you use Docker or many other projects running simultaneously, you can mention that port name as well. And as I mentioned here, you should open the same in the browser, the same host, local host and 8080 port, which I mentioned in the browser. Now I'm going back to my shell and I'm going to run I should first activate my environment because this is a fresh shell. It closed whatever I had created before. So again, the env appears on the left and you can see that I'm running the server. It is just exactly like manage.py. I just copied that URL and now as you can see, the welcome appears on screen. Very simple program and a very simple output, but this would be the foundation or the base on which we are going to build more capabilities. Next step, we are going to pick up settings from the environment because like I said, we did a lot of insecure and bad practices like mentioning the secret itself inside the source code, which is like hard coding passwords, not a good practice at all. So let's use the OS module. The OS module provides you access to the environment, os.environ, environ, if you want to spell it, pronounce it that way. Now os.environ, I believe is working like a dictionary, or at least provides an interface similar to a Python dictionary. So you have get. The reason I use get instead of square brackets is I want to provide it with a default value. I don't want an error. In case I don't mention debug in the environment, I want it to be returning something sensible, some default value which is sensible. So in this case, I'm going to say it is going to return blank and it is going to compare it with 1. So if you set debug to 1, it would become a debug environment. Otherwise, the default will be not a debug environment. So this is always a good default because debug is insecure. By default, it can leak a lot of information. You should never use it in production. So the default is to set debug to false. And secret key also is picked up from the environment. the default is a bad secret. Instead of putting it as an empty string, I prefer to put something there. Again, this should be always overridden by an environment variable. We did not use allow host before, but this is a recommended practice. Here I'm going to use a slightly insecure way of putting it, saying that allowed host is everything. So I'm going to disable the host header validation. But this is not a big risk in most, even in a production environment sometimes. In this example, I'm going to just stick with this. I'm going to say that allowed host is everything, so that you don't face errors when you're not using some of the permitted allowed hosts like 127.0.0.1 or localhost, which is the default. So I'm just gonna go a little more broader than that. Now I expect this to be something that people would want to do by default. So I'm going to mention that in my README, that this is how you should execute this program. You should mention that it's in debugging mode, and you should give some secret key in the environment. So this is how you define an environment variable in Linux. And when you run it, as you can see here, debug equal to 1 will become part of the environment inside Python. And when Python runs app.py, app.py will inherit those environment variables. You can do this in other ways, but this will kind of limit the environment variable to the scope of running that particular command, in case you're not familiar with how it's done in Unix-like operating systems. Now, as you can see, if I refresh and if I just give some wrong URL like ABC, the good thing is, because debug is 1, this is one way I'm trying to check if debug is turned on, because I explicitly said debug equal to 1 and it is picking that up. If the program was not picking that up, since the default value is false, you should have not seen this debugging page. As the last line says, you're seeing this error because debug equal to true. So looks like it's working great. Looks like we have the same result, but now we have followed the best practices. Next, what I want to talk to you about is how do you define templates and context variables. Right now our page is quite bare, and most of your pages would have a lot of well designed pages. I mean a lot of images, colors and backgrounds. So it would not really require you to use templates, but it would be really good if you can use Django templates, and as a result you get a lot of convenience of using context variables to populate those templates. But more importantly, you get the security, because when you simply replace strings using string interpolation, which is one way of inserting values into a string instead of using templates, what would generally happen is you are potentially liable to create some security holes, right? So Django, when it populates a template using context variables, performs a lot of sanitization and security checks, which might not be possible, which might not be happening if you're using string interpolation. So I'm going to use templates and I'm going to show you how. But before that, I'm going to use a landing page that I designed. And the interesting bit about this landing page is that we are going to create a landing page for flying cars, right? A completely imaginary fictional product. Well, you never know, if Tesla wants to do it, he might actually end up making one. But right now it is an imaginary product, and I want to create a landing page or a coming soon page. And I tried to do some research about what should be the best practices when you're designing such a page. And some of the things are, there should be a clear value proposition, the bulleted list or some description about the core benefits of the product should be there, a single call to action, like, do this. It should not be just pure information. There should be some call to action at the end of the page or somewhere in the page. There should be social proof. that part is optional, I believe, because I have not done that. And there should be a hero shot or a photo of the product news. That again, I have not done that, but I'm just gonna go with the logo and try to give, because in some cases, like in a product like what I'm talking about, the product photograph might not be ready yet, right? For example. So all these are just for your information. I've tried to create a very minimal design based on for the purposes of this example. So this is what the page which I have created looks like. You can see that there is almost all the elements that we just spoke about. This is just for your information how the HTML looks like. I'm using a custom font so that it gives a little more professional look, not the boring fonts. I'm using hero patterns for getting an embedded background image. So there is a pattern of circular pattern design that I've used here. Everything is embedded here. So you can see that the image, the logo, is actually embedded within this HTML file, so that you don't have to refer to another file. So everything is practically there. The description, the call to action is actually a form, and you can see that the form has some hidden elements which I'll talk about later. The main thing to notice is that it has an email placeholder. So let's get started. And you can see that I want to use get WSGI application here, which I did not do in my earlier simple example, because I'm trying to create it as minimal as possible. But you'll see in a minute why this is needed. And of course, we need to use the request context and template. Request context is more improved version of context, which has the request embedded in it. And of course, we have to mention which templates we want to use explicitly. Unlike in the past where Django always assumed that you want to use Django templates, now you have to mention that you're going to use Django templates, because Django also supports alternatives like Jinja 2, other templating languages. So that is something that we need to configure. And now is the fun part. We are going to replace our simple plain text response and put something more interesting, right? Most probably we won't need the text string. I'm going to define a global variable called main underscore HTML. I think I put that wrong. But first I need to mention a dictionary called request context. It's a dictionary like object, I would say, to provide it with the request as the first argument and a dictionary. The dictionary would say what's inside that. For now, I'm going to use populate something called context, which is just the body of the template. I'll just come to the template quickly. And now is the line which I forgot to mention, right? I mean, I forgot to mention app as a global variable, which is a get WSGI application, which sometimes it doesn't complain, but once you come to an advanced stage, Django expects that there is something which is defined as app. Now I'm defining the main underscore HTML, which is all the HTML code that I just showed you. I can copy paste that from the designer or whoever made this. In this case, I made this. And you can see the long strings. Some of the long lines are all the images. This is the background image, which you see in behind the page. And this is the another SVG file, which is the logo. And you can see here that the content in line number 80, the content is basically the context that you had to replace. Need to change that. And now you can see that everything is much better. It looks like a proper landing page now, except for the form, which would which we would be tackling next. But whatever context variable that we provided is now replaced over there. Next, we are going to fill our template with that form. We are first going to start, we're going to do this in two parts. First, we're going to create a very basic form which does not handle the form workflow and just redirects it to the thank you page. Of course, if we need to redirect it, we need to use HTTP response redirect. And yeah, this is interesting because middleware classes are something that you would probably get automatically populated when you create start project, but it's very, very important. As you can see, I'm going to define 3 middleware classes which protects you and provides additional security for your form. Now, this cannot be understated. There have been many cases of people who forgot this capability of Django, tried to use something simple like bottle, and have had all their information or resources which were protected behind an authenticated, whatever authentication they use, to be retrieved through forms which were not having CSRF protection or clickjacking or something like that. Now, middleware is something that happens in between the request response cycle. It happens inside the framework itself, and it provides you protection from all these potential security problems. And this is one of the key reasons why you should be using Django, because one person might be able to recreate all this from scratch or by assembling it from other third-party libraries. But if you're already a Django programmer or a Django developer, then you might be familiar with this and you might be expecting this in your framework, but your framework is too small and does not provide what Django provides, right? Next, we are going to create the form called enlist form. So as you noticed, enlist form is quite small. It's not a model form, it's just a basic form. The first field we are creating is email, and Django already provides you with the email field, so you don't have to use the string field, for example. I would want this to be a required field. Unless you fill this, you should not be able to submit the form. I don't want it to show the label email. I would like it to be inside as a grayed out placeholder, and I'll show you how you can do that. You can use what is called a widget, and inside widgets you can mention additional attributes for HTML form elements like placeholders. Now, if you use something like Crispy Forms, sometimes this might be automatically done for you. But since we are doing here everything manually, I'm just going to say the placeholder is email. Next is a hidden field I like to create called referrer. So referrer is the URL from which you came from. Right now, I'm just going to say it's a character field and it is using a hidden input. And for now it's okay, right? I mean, I'm not going to use that in this particular step. Next, we need to change our home view. Our home view now has to check whether it was a post request. Basically, after you submitted the form, it would come as a post request to the same view, and it is going to enter, it is going to say if method equal to post as true. And if it is posted, I want it to be redirected to a thank you page. And I'm just hard coding the URL here. Again, not a great practice, but in this case, it's too small, it's too basic an application, so I think it's all right. Next, I'm going to create the workflow for the non-post part of it, because at that redirect, you're just gone to the next page. So now what you're seeing is what happens if you're just first opening the page. I'm just going to recreate the same request context, the same content, but in this case, the content should be you need to sign up for early access, right? And that's the line I want to show before the form. And I have to create another context variable called form, which I have not created yet, but that's where the form will actually go to, the empty form would go to. Now, you might notice that this is not the complete workflow. Like I said, this is just the first step. Next, I want to create a view for thank you page. That should be quite straightforward. I'm just going to create a context. So I'm just going to copy paste the context and the HTTP response part of it. I'm going to say thank you in the content, and I'm not going to give any form. So I'm just going to say thank you for signing up, and we will contact you. So great, that's why we took your email. It's a positive confirmation of an action. I don't want to show the form anymore. It will just confuse the person who just gave you the email. Next, I want to create a URL pattern for the thank you page. It's just thanks followed by a slash, and it should just take you to the thanks page. Next, I'm going down to the next I think I should go down to the template. I need to create the basic form structure. So there are many ways to do forms in a template within Django. The first thing I want to check is whether the form was actually populated. If it is none, as it happens in the thank you page, I want to not show anything at all. So that's the first check I would do if there is a form variable, context variable that is populated. If it is there, then I would try to create the outer part of the form tags, which is submitting the action. Action dot means it goes to the same view. So that's why we have the post check over there. This is a very common pattern. Almost all Django developers must be already familiar with this. The method should be post. You can provide a class for your form if you are doing some sort of a CSS styling for the form. In my case, I don't think I'm doing a lot of styling here. I always prefer to open and close way of writing. Normally, if I'm using HTML, opening the HTML directly in my Emacs editor, the automatic closing happens in the editor itself. So I'm just trying to do that out of habit. The CSRF token is quite important. If it is not there, your form will not be valid. So Django always checks that, and that's why we added that middleware. And this is a very important security measure for your forms not to be exploited, especially if it is giving access to something like a free giveaway, like a ebook or something like that, as it happened to some friends of mine. Now, you would notice that I'm not just trying to say, I could say form.asTable or form.asP or something like that. I'm actually expanding all of that. I mean, I'm going to say explicitly that this is where the non-field error should come. This is where the email field should come. This is where the referrer field should come. This is where the email error should come. All of that is now explicitly spelled out, because that gives me tremendous control. That gives me an idea of where everything would be like. And generally, to be very honest, the default styling is not to my preference at all. I mean, sometimes I'd be using some Bootstrap or some other framework, and it would be in a completely different order than I expect there. And as you can see, I'm using the button tag and the tag type submit. I think by default it would be like, I think by default there is no button as well. So this is something that I'm copying from my style, from what was given to me by the designer. So as you can see, this is how the final page would look like. I'm going to check if my server is still running. I'm going to refresh this page, and now the form appears. So as you can see, I can enter any email here. I'm just entering a dummy email here, a.a. So you can see that the thank you page also works perfectly. So and you can see that it's taking me to the correct thank you page. So the next part is handling the form workflow. This is the part which I usually do as a next step, and I'm replicating the same thing here. One thing I forgot while mentioning the referrer is it's not required. I'm sure when I checked that that there was an error with referrer not mentioned. So now I have made it not an optional field so that it will not show that error. Next, I'm going to actually do the workflow for post. So if post was successful, then the form should have all the information that you require, right? So that's why you need to populate the form again with the request.post. Now, one of the checks we would have to do, all this is very familiar to Django developers, is if it is valid. And if it is valid, I need to take the clean underscore data field. In this case, I just need the email and the referrer. So I'll put it in some local variables. I'll also just, for debugging purposes, print that I got that email. Again, this is something that I do when I'm developing. Not necessarily this print statement would appear in my final product, especially if it's going for production. I would remove this print statement. Now I am not using a model or a database. So I'm actually opening a file called CSV list, which is not yet mentioned, but it's just a file name. And the reason I'm using a file here is because if I'm using a database, I would probably have to define an application in the Django's terminology, an app, which has models.py and all that. And since the whole idea is that we just need to use a single file, and in most of the cases, what I feel is especially in, let's take this example, what I would need is just a list of email addresses, right? And most of the time I would expect that in an Excel file, or a normal person who's not a programmer would probably use Excel to manage that list. And that's the reason why I'm using a CSV file. Now, CSV file is a comma separated value file, very easy to create. All you have to do is separate them by commas. There's a fantastic CSV writer library which is built into Python, but I'm not going to use all that because I know that email addresses are not going to have commas and things like that. So I'm just going to keep it very simple. I'm just going to open a simple text file. I'm just going to write the email and the referrer and the IP address into that file and save it. And that's it, right? So that's the reason why I'm calling it CSV list, because it's a list and it's a CSV file. And I'm just going to open it in A mode. A is append. So it will not overwrite whatever is already there. It'll just add a new line, or it'll just append to the end of the file. It's exactly what you need, right? I mean, you just need to add email addresses. As new visitors come to it, the list should keep growing. And you can see that that /n will make sure that there's new line. Next, I'm going to mention what's the name of this file. It will be written in the same directory where your app.py is. So I'm just going to call it the list.csv because it's pretty much obvious what the list is. Now we need to think if this workflow is good enough. Like I said, this is a standard workflow for or a pattern, as I would say, for returning or for processing a form. Next, I need to redirect this form to the thank you page, which we had done earlier, but now I'm doing it only if it is valid. If it is not valid, the same form should appear. This time it should have all the errors highlighted and things like that. Now, I think I forgot to mention form.referrer errors, so I'm just going to add that here. Just in case, some of these manually injected fields get added. So eventually the full file should look like this. The main workflow is completed. If I go to the thank you page, the thank you page is also completed. Looks like we are good to go to refresh our page. So if you refresh this page and you try to enter some email ID and add that, this is the positive workflow. It will just say thank you. If I give some invalid email ID, interestingly, it does not even have to go to submit. It will actually, that field is automatically checking that, because that field has that type that it should be an email. So it will give you very good responsive. Instead of refreshing the page, So it'll only accept, so you can see I got the second email ID, third email ID, and so on. So all of this is working fine. Now let's check the CSV file to see if the CSV file has captured all the emails, and we are good to go. Next, as I mentioned, I want to capture some additional information about the visitors, where they came from, which IP address they are using. So this would involve again modifying or changing our view a little bit to extract the referrer. Now you must have noticed that we have not mentioned the referrer, how the referrer is populated anywhere. I'm just going to take the referrer at this point, and I'm going to explain how we are going to give that initial value to referrer in a minute. So we are just going to extract the referrer, and we are just going to write it to the CSV file. Interestingly, referrer is having a different spelling in UK. So you must have noticed that I'm using request.meta here. Request.meta typically is a dictionary which contains a lot of excellent information. One information which I find very relevant and useful here is the remote address. So remote underscore address is what IP your visitor is visiting from. Like I said, it's not a 100% reliable way of telling that person is actually there. That person could be using a VPN for all you know, and trying it from a different location. But at least as a rough, in an aggregate point of view, you can expect maybe 80% of people not to be using any of these misleading IPs, and giving you a good idea of what countries are interested, things like that. And in any case, you already have Google Analytics, which I've not mentioned here, but most people would be using it. Now we are going ahead and putting that referrer inside the CSV file. Now every entry should now contain the referrer. We're also going ahead and adding the IP if it is available. So referrer may not be available in some cases. IP generally would be available in most cases. Now is the point where I'm going to give an initial value to the referrer. Now initial is a parameter that takes a dictionary, and this dictionary should contain the value which is inside again, and another thing inside the meta dictionary, which is called HTTP underscore referrer. Now you might be wondering why I'm putting referrer in this initial value and IP address in the other value. Now referrer, you will only get one opportunity to pick it up. That is when the visitor just lands in your page. So that is why I have put it over there at the initial. After the person submits the form, that is when it enters the top workflow. That at that point your referrer is changed. Your referrer is now yourself, because you were the domain that redirected you to that the visitor to that next page. So you have lost the opportunity to find out where the visitor came from. So it's very important that at the first instance itself, you capture the HTTP underscore referrer value, you populate it in your form, and then you pass that value from the hidden field of that form to the next part of your form lifecycle. Now this is a very roundabout or indirect, it might seem a bit convoluted, but this is a very typical pattern. I've seen this even in PHP, I've seen this in Java, web frameworks. So all you need to remember is that the IP address of the visitor generally doesn't change, right? It's the remote underscore address part of the meta. It's the same thing whether you're submitting it the first time or whether you're getting redirected. But the HTTP underscore referrer, that is important to be captured in the beginning itself. And that's why I'm passing it as a hidden value inside the form. Now, some of you might be wondering, can't this be tampered with if you're submitting it through some command line form like curl or something like that? Yes, it can be. That's why I'm not calling it a 100% foolproof way, but it's not a security hole. It's not a vulnerability. It is just I would say and nice to know kind of information that I would like to add to this just to make it much more useful. And trust me, it's going to be extremely useful. Your marketing guys are going to thank you for it. So I hope you learned something new. If you did, please don't forget to like and share this video. If you like content of this kind, I urge you strongly to subscribe. Uh, if you want to be notified of new videos, please go ahead and click that bell icon so that you get notifications as soon as the videos become available. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much. And this is Arun Rocks. Bye bye.